Time for another exciting coding challenge so that you can keep practicing your new HTML skills. And in this one, I want you to build this component for this Converse All-Star shoe. And I'm saying component here because I want you to imagine this content here in the context of something like an e-commerce store. So imagine that we have a shoe store and there are multiple shoes, and for each of them there is then like the small component with this description. So stuff like the price, a short description, a link, and then some product details here. Now I am building this component, so I'm writing this HTML on a special coding platform called CodePen.io. So this is a place online where we can basically write our code, and it will then automatically execute the code and render it, and it makes it also easy to share that code. Now, of course, you don't need to use CodePen in order to complete this challenge. You can just go to your code editor and, for example, add a brand new HTML file here, and then build all the code in there. The reason why I'm not doing that here in the video is because we're actually going to build on this challenge later. So we will keep developing this very small project over the next few sections, and that would then create a mess of different files and a lot of different code. But of course, because you're doing it on your own computer, it's easier for you. And so you can just, as I said, if you want, create a new HTML file and do it here. But on the other hand, I think it's also helpful and useful for you to learn a little bit about CodePen.io and create the challenge there. So let me just give you a very quick demonstration of CodePen. So just Google CodePen, I would say, or you can go to CodePen.io. And then all you have to do is to click here on Start Coding. Now, maybe in the future, something has changed about CodePen, so about this interface, but you will always be able to create a new CodePen simply by going to codepen.io/pen. So just like this. So here we basically have a panel where we can write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript if we want, or we can also just collapse these panels if we don't need them, which is the case right now. And so here we can write our HTML. Let's just write an H1 element, hello world, for example. And you see that here we have to, again, manually close the element. But anyway, you see that after some time, it then renders the result down here. So in this results panel, basically. You can also change the name of your CodePen. So let's say challenge 2, which is the name of this lecture. Okay, and then you can also save it. Now to save it, you will have to create a free account, but I would say that it's actually worthwhile to do so. But of course, it's optional and you are not forced to create a new account here. But if you do, that is actually very helpful because then you will get a special URL for each CodePen, and then you can share that CodePen with others. So if you want to just like create a quick example, a quick demo of something to show it to someone, then you can just come to CodePen, create it right here, and then copy paste the URL from here once you have saved it. And by the way, what I just described is actually also the best way of sharing code in the Q&A section on Udemy in case you run into any problems. Okay, so again, it would probably be a good idea to create an account here because it's just useful and many programmers use CodePen. It's a very popular tool. But anyway, going back now to the challenge, let me give you a couple of hints. Okay, so this is what the result looks like that I want you to build. But to help you a little bit, I will actually need to change you a bit of the code. So here in Change View, we can now switch to the editor view, which will then look just like what I showed you before. All right, so now we have the editors here on top and then the result down here. So there are some things I need to explain before you can get started. So first of all, I want you to wrap all of this content inside an article element. And remember how I mentioned that an article element can not only be used for something like a written blog post article, but also for like really a physical article. And so a shoe like this is a perfect example for that. So this is an article, and again, coming back to the example of having like an e-commerce store, then each shoe would be a different article. And so you would have one article element for each of the shoes, right? Then down here, there is an element that we have never used, which is this clickable button. And so down here, you see that this is simply the button element. And so you can just go ahead and use that. And then finally, there's something else, which is this symbol here. So this arrow here. Now, remember how back in our project, so here, I mentioned that this symbol right here, this copyright symbol, is an HTML entity, right? Remember that? And so this arrow here is just another HTML entity. And I also mentioned back then that there is a very handy list on my resources page, which is this one. Now, if you're watching this in the future, then this page probably looks quite different. But for now, this is what I have. And the HTML entity reference that I mentioned earlier is this one. So let's just open it up actually. And then there is a lot of stuff that you can use. So all of these different symbols. And here, for example, is the copy symbol that we used before in VS Code. Now, this is a huge list, and I'm just going to use a Command or Control F to search on the page for arrows. And here we go. So there are all these different arrows here, and the one that I used is this. So to insert this arrow into your own HTML code, all you have to do is to write this HTML entity. Okay? And yeah, I will leave this. Oh, well, actually, we don't need it anymore. Right. Oh, and just one more thing, which is the image. So you cannot really upload images to CodePen unless you have a paid account, but that doesn't make sense, I think. And so I actually uploaded the image for you onto this URL. So you see that this is actually another way of including images. So essentially an image that is coming from a certain URL. So in contrast, right here, when we wrote our code before, then the source was always an image on our own computer. So in this case, in the image folder, and then this image name. And if you're building this challenge on your own computer, then you can just use this challenge image here. So it's exactly the same. Okay, but if you're building it on CodePen like I'm going to do, then you will need this image that is located at this URL. So just copy this here somehow from the screen and use it for your own project. Then the dimensions of the image should be 250 by 250. And with this, I think I gave you everything that you need to know. So go ahead and copy this URL. And now I will switch to the full page view so that you can see everything at once. And now I will just leave you to it and come back here in 5 or 10 minutes once you are ready. Okay, here we are back, and I hope that it wasn't too much of a challenge for you, so that it wasn't too hard. So hopefully you got to practice your skills a little bit more. And so now, in case you have any doubt or you run into any problem, I will now show you my solution here. So as I mentioned, we are using an article here. And now for the heading, I used an H2, actually and not an H1, because of that idea of this being a component within a bigger page. Okay, and so each page should only have one H1. And so if we then have multiple articles, then each of them should just be an H2. So converse Chuck Taylor all star. Well, I could have just copied this from the demo, but anyway. So IMG. And now I will actually go ahead and copy this URL here in the editor view. Okay. Then the alt text is just copying it now here. Oh, this should be enough like this. And then the height and the width at 250. And here it is. Here is our image. Great. Now let's go back here and actually copy all of this content. Why not? Then we can just, after that, wrap everything into its own element. So here we have the price, and I will keep using a paragraph for each of these elements. So for each of the text elements. Then we have free shipping. Okay. Oh, and you see that CodePen actually automatically did some indentation there. So that's quite helpful. Then here there's another paragraph. Right. So we are getting our content formatted, except of course for all the content that is not inside any element. So remember how I mentioned that HTML doesn't care about any spacing or about any enters, so like line breaks. Everything is just in the same line. And so that's why we need to structure our content in a logical way. Now here we have that anchor element. And actually, I didn't really tell you where this link should point to. So you could have just created an empty link like this, basically, or you could have linked the Converse website. So let me just grab that link. So converse.com, probably. And I'm doing it like this. You will see in a moment why. And the reason is because we actually need this HTTPS : // so the entire URL. This is not necessary here. And now here let's close this. And here, of course, we do not just want this symbol, because this is not really correct. So instead we want that HTML entity that you hopefully used. So that is the right arrow. So this is the abbreviation here for R stands for right, and then R for arrow. And so indeed, this is the result that we got. Okay, so we have all of this part. Now let's take care of this list here and this heading. And finally, then also this button. So I have an H2 already up here, right? And so for this one, I'm using an H3 now. H3 and closing it. Nice. And now remember, in order to create a list, which is what we want here, so a bullet pointed list, we use the unordered element, or actually the unordered list element. And now we just wrap all of these into one li element, right? So I hope that at this point, you already know these elements. So you have practiced a lot, and so I'm sure that this is getting a lot more easy for you now. Let's just remove this dot here, and we are almost done. So all we need now is that button in the end. And so, as I showed you before, for that we can simply use the button element in HTML. So add to cart, and of course that button, so clicking that button will not do anything. For that we would need some JavaScript, but at least it is here visible. Okay, and we see here that we have 80 unsaved changes. So if you want to preserve those changes, again, you would have to save the CodePen and create a free account in order to do that. Oh, and I thought that we were actually done with this challenge, but there is one small piece missing. So this text here in the original is actually bold. So that's the only difference. So that's something that we're missing. And so let's simply wrap this value here, so all this text, into a strong element. Not string, strong. And you see, now at this point, we didn't close this tag, so the strong element. And so now all the rest of the content basically became strong. So everything is bold now because this element never ends. But of course, that would be a mistake. It wouldn't even be valid HTML, but the browsers somehow still are able to render it somehow. But anyway, with this, we finished this challenge and actually also the introduction to HTML section. So make sure to review everything that you just learned in this section, all your new skills. And then once you're ready, we can together move on to our next section, which will be the fundamentals of CSS. And so there you will finally learn how to actually style your content and make it look a little bit more polished and more beautiful. So that's really, really exciting. And so, yeah, once you're ready, let's move on there. See you soon.